Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2020. My name is Jorge Cruz. I'm interviewing Athena Cruz for Labor Studies Voces of a pandemic story collection project. This is a collaborative project between UCLA and Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Cruz, that this interview will be placed on the Digital Public Library of America and shared with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you would like to discuss, please make sure to bring it up so we can discuss it. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to be interviewed. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. UCLA Labor Studies wishes to archive your interview, along with any other photographs and other documentation on the Digital Public Library of America. UCLA Labor Studies will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate to UCLA Labor Studies. So the first question, do you give UCLA Labor Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Digital Public Library of America?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, next question. Do you grant UCLA Labor Studies right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Do you agree to allow UCLA Labor Studies and the Digital Public Library of America to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Fourth question. Do you grant UCLA Labor Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, I'm just going to read this little paragraph first, and I'm going to ask you the last 2 questions. So we have many questions in an online pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help future research on this topic. The interview form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to the Benson Library and NIU libraries, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members. So that will not be part of your public profile. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library and NIU libraries. So question 5, do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson Library?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, last question. On occasion, the UCLA Labor Studies and Voces receives requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you again for agreeing to participate in this interview with Voces. So the first question I want to ask you is just to kind of get the interview started. So talk to me about one thing that brings you joy right now.
Dancing brings me joy right now.
How long have you been dancing for?
I've been dancing for 15 years.
Okay. And how do you identify? Do you identify as Latina, Latinx, Hispanic, or Chicana, or any other term?
I identify as Latina and Latinx.
Latinx.
Mm-hmm.
Why both Latina and Latinx?
Latina because I identify as a female, with pronouns she, her, and hers, and Latinx because I also identify myself as part of the queer community.
Okay. And where are you originally from?
I'm originally from LA County. So I grew up in Downey, California, and then I spent my high school and my college in Orange County, La Habra, and Irvine.
So where do you live now?
Right now, I live in San Bernardino County because of COVID. So I had to come back home, stay with my dad in Ontario, but I'm planning to go back to Irvine, UC Irvine, once the school opens up again.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You mentioned that you're a student and you're a dancer. So just tell us a little bit more about yourself, like introduce yourself.
Yeah, okay. So I'm a incoming junior at the University of California, Irvine. I'm a double major in dance and international studies, an aspiring artist. I'm trying to balance right now. Well, right now I'm kind of trying to like balance out my schedule with COVID and trying to make myself productive, trying to use the time to answer and, kind of like answer questions that I have on regards to my career, like my future, and how to prepare for like the future ahead of me given what's going on right now. Um, but when I go back to school, I'm usually trying to balance uh, being a double major, going to LA every week to pursue a dance career, and also on top of that, working. So, yeah.
So it sounds like you have a pretty busy schedule as a dancer, as a full-time student, and you also had a part-time job, correct?
Yes.
So walk me through a day in your work life before COVID-19. So like, let's say, January or February, what was like, walk me through a regular day.
Okay. So in a regular day, I would wake up around 7:30 to then like go to my classes at 8. I usually try to start my classes early because I mean, if not, I won't wake up. So I'll start my classes early. Um, so I'll wake up at 8 o'clock, stay on campus until probably around 2 to 4 p.m. Go make myself something to eat before I head off to LA to take dance classes, and then come back, do homework, and then go to sleep. So yeah, and then so that's usually how my days go from Monday through Thursday, and then I usually take Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to work, and then it kind of just repeats itself every week. Sometimes along the week, I give tours too. So sometimes Monday through Thursday, like instead of like for any off time that I have, I'll go give a tour. Or if I have a free hour or a free 2 hours, I'll go ahead and take it up to give a college tour. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. On Sundays, I come visit my family when I can, and yeah, that's pretty much it for as far as like my schedule goes. It's pretty consistent before quarantine. Yeah.
So, and you said you also worked like part-time at the school and also part-time at a restaurant, right?
Yes. Yeah. Part time um, as a campus tour guide, and then part time as a hostess at Eureka.
So, how did you first learn about COVID-19? Was it through your employer, through friends, through your family, or through the media?
Mm, I first learned about COVID-19 through my roommate, who's an international Chinese student. So her family was being affected before we would ever care about COVID-19. So she was talking about a virus before we even like started caring. Like I said, she was wearing masks like every single day, and um, I don't know. I just felt like, I mean, I was like, wow, like, is this really that serious? Like, I don't know that you need to be wearing a mask but, um, like, I come to respect that now because, yeah, like, sorry, let me go back to the question. But that's how I found out about COVID. And then, like, it was just kind of something that I heard about, and then I knew it became real and it was gonna be like something that affected us when the school announced that we were going virtual for week 10 and finals week. So yeah, that's how I found out about COVID.
More or less, when was this? Was this like around March, February when this started happening?
Yeah, this was around, so the school closed down around March, I believe. Yeah, around March. But I mean, my roommate was like wearing masks like 2 months before. Like she was, yeah. So should have listened to her.
So what was your initial reaction to information about COVID-19? Could you see the current situation that we're in now, like happening?
Um, I'm sorry, what was my initial reaction?
Yeah, like what were your initial reactions when you first learned about COVID-19, like back
Oh.
in February? What did you think about the virus? Did you think it was that serious, or did you not think it was that serious? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I first heard about the virus, I knew it was serious because and because schools were colleges were shutting down. And I knew in order for a college to shut down and go remote, there had to be something that was going to affect the campus safety and campus health. So I knew it was serious. Um, but I definitely thought that this was going to be temporary. So I remember my dance studios were closing too, and they said they were going to be back open in 15 days. And come half a year, they're most of them are still closed, and some of them are opening up, but with safety guidelines. Like they're only giving classes outdoors now instead of indoors. Or for example, the studio that I'm dancing at right now, everybody has to get tested every month, and it's a group of 25 people, and they only allow in the same 25 people every Monday and Wednesday. So there's a little bit more safety in the sense that there's less exchangement of people. It's the same people, and we're all getting tested every single month. But I didn't think that this was going to go on for this long.
Um, so let's talk a little bit more about like first let's talk about your employer at the restaurant, and how that has shifted during the pandemic, and then we'll go back to like how the your dance studio shifted as well with the pandemic. So were you laid off because of the pandemic?
Yeah. Everybody at Eureka was furloughed, and all campus tour guides were also furloughed. So yeah, and that happened about 2 weeks after the UCs announced that they were shutting down. So when UC shut down, immediately the amount of people who were coming into Eureka went down. Like I would get one customer in 2 hours, and so they just ended up furloughing us. So, and I'm still furloughed right now.
So what did you do? Were you able to apply for unemployment benefits at that time?
Yeah, so when our hours were reduced, they suggested that we apply for unemployment for reduced hours. So I immediately did that, just for reduced hours. Never thought that I would need it because I was going to get fully furloughed, but I ended up needing it, like just for my income period, all of my income. So that's all of my income right now.
Did you have any trouble applying to unemployment benefits and receiving any benefits?
I actually didn't, but I've heard a handful of people who have, but I didn't. I don't know if it was because I applied early or because I even had to change my address. I incorrectly put in my address, and I changed it online, and right away they were able to give me my check to the correct address. So I didn't have any problems at all.
And what about the housing situation? No, now that you weren't I guess on campus anymore, what did you do with your student housing?
So with my student housing, I was on a lease contract. So um, when I moved back home, I knew I wanted to move back home. Um, but either way, I still had to keep paying rent from March until July. And so it's only $400 for me, which I mean wasn't too bad, but I mean it's still $400 because I shared a room with two other girls. So it was three girls, three of us living in a room. So rent wasn't too expensive. But I have friends who have contracts until September, and they're paying $800 for every single month, or up to $900 for their room every single month. Not even living at their apartments, and yeah, and so and they're still paying to this day, and they don't even live there. And some of them were not even able to get their landlords to get them off the lease contract. So, yeah.
You were fortunate enough to kind of get out of your lease, right?
Yeah, I didn't get out of my lease, but my lease wasn't too long. My lease ended right when the quarter ended, versus other people had leases that went on until the whole summer. So, yeah.
And you moved in with your parents, right? Okay.
Yes.
And how has it been transitioning to virtual teaching, right? Taking classes online. How has that been for you? Have you been struggling with that?
Yeah, I've been struggling. I struggled a lot with online learning because I usually came home on the weekends, and I kind of made this space my rest space where I want, whereas Irvine, I've always associated Irvine as my workspace, like always just working, always on the go. And so it was really hard, and it took a really long time to disassociate home from being um, my just relaxed space. I had to make this space my workspace, my dance space, my and at the same time my rest space. There was times where like I was just so confused. I couldn't even sleep sometimes because like my mind was trying so hard to kind of make sense of this space, and like how I'm supposed to feel in this space, and how I'm supposed to, if that makes sense. So it was really challenging at first, and I communicated that to my professors, and thankfully they were really understanding of that. But definitely my grades were not as um, as good as they could have been, because of that reason. Yeah, but other than that, yeah, just kind of getting comfortable with this space was a difficult transition. And also, I know this is a problem with a lot of people, but kind of going back to family and having those family relations that you had prior to going to college that you kind of let go of when you became an adult and you started being independent in college. You know, when I came back, I felt like I had to spend more time with my sister because, oh, I'm not going to see her anymore. She's going to leave to college. So I have to spend time with her, or I have to spend time with my dad. And I feel like that's very common within Hispanic households because we have very strong relations. We have very like family oriented culture, and so we often feel like we have to give and give and give to family. And I definitely felt that when I was at home. Like I felt like I had to be giving them time, whereas when I was in college I would use that time for myself to rest or to recover, versus when I was here I was doing homework, and then I felt like I had to spend time with my sister. Like I felt like I had to spend time with my dad, you know? So yeah.
So you felt like an increase in family obligations.
Yeah.
Did this increase any level of like stress, anxiety, and also maybe perhaps fear of what, the future? And if so, how did you deal with that? Like, how did you deal with that added stress? And how did you cope throughout these past couple of months?
Yeah. So there was I definitely felt more stressed out Um, and I know this because I mean, I know that there's things that that happen to you that make you know that you're stressed out. Like, for example, like some people can't sleep, some people don't eat. For me, like when I take a shower, like my hair will fall out, and I know that I'm very stressed and I need to do something for myself. Um, but I think what did come out good from quarantine was the amount of time that I had, since I wasn't going from place to place or, taking 2-hour commutes to LA. Like, I had more time. If there's anything good that came out of quarantine, it was definitely having more time. And it gave me a lot of time to reflect on, like, my future. And thankfully, I wasn't in the position where I was a senior, so I have to like automatically, like, oh, it's quarantine and I have to go find a job. But thankfully, I was able to use this time to reflect on, like, okay, well, to reflect on some of my goals, to reflect on, some of my future plans, and now actually have the time to look into it and research into it, versus when I was in Irvine, I was just constantly like running on this guinea pig like wheel, and like keep like continuously doing the same thing every week, and it kind of didn't even let me think. So what I have been doing more is buying more books, looking more into how to manage money. I've bought some books on how to manage money, given the circumstances right now. But yeah.
I think that's interesting because, in a way, some of the positive, like you said, that came out of the pandemic is that you're more cognizant of your time. You have more time to do things for yourself, and you've also started being more conscious of how you manage your money as well, as far as saving money. Did you have any savings before the pandemic?
I didn't. And I think that was also um, uh, one of the things about like being in that constant ongoing cycle is that I almost like didn't really pay attention to what was happening to my money, or like, but um, coming home, in addition to the fact that I have more spendings when I'm in Irvine, like I was able to save a little bit more being at home.
You had also mentioned how with the extra time that you've kind of sat down and like reevaluated some of the goals. So how have your goals shifted since the pandemic? Do you have different goals now than you did before the pandemic?
Um, I don't think I have different goals now. I just think that I have a better idea of what to do to get to my to achieve my goals. Um, so yeah.
And what are those goals?
Yeah, well, some of my goals, for example, with dance, I'd like to get an agency before I graduate. So I started making more connections through virtual dance intensives with people who are dancing professionally right now. And so that was a plus with that. And then some of my goals, for example, with my international studies major, like I would like to get an internship with a broadcasting station. And before that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my international studies major. Like there was a million things that I could think to do, but yeah, so that is one of my goals right now. But I'm just continue looking for internships and stuff right now.
You had mentioned before that you were actually in the process of applying to a specific internship with Locator Radio. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I did so Locatora Radio it's an indie podcast. Um so there weren't any like formal internship opportunities posted on LinkedIn or Indeed or Chegg. So I kind of just like with with your help and like your talk, I kind of just like had to make an opportunity of my own and email them myself, and with your help make a cover letter, make my resume. And so I emailed them, and I emailed them my resume and my cover letter, which I took a lot of time making. And it's been a week and they haven't messaged me back, but I'm totally fine with that, because there's a lot of great lessons that I've learned from this. And that is that, like, I can't wait for opportunities to come my way. And another thing is that, what was I going to say? Yeah, and that people will not always be responsive, but I just have to pave the way for myself. And always just looking at things in the positive light. So yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely good skills. And Locator Radio is a Latina run radio, right? Podcast.
Yeah, and I love what they do. Like when I listen to them, I feel like they definitely, like, they empower me, and they make me think about issues that are going on right now, and how I can make a change as an individual, and how change starts with me as an individual. So yeah, it's just something that I want to be part of. And it's like another goal from, like, it made me realize that a goal for myself is like to do the same for other people, is like, yeah, so to help people like see that change starts within yourself.
That's good. Yeah, that's inspiring. And so you had mentioned that, like, also after the pandemic, you had gotten a little bit closer with your family as well. Do you know have any of your family members or friends been personally affected by COVID-19?
Yeah, so thankfully none of my family members lost their jobs, so I'm super thankful for that. But a family member was affected by COVID-19, as in like they got tested positive for COVID-19. So it kind of, some of my family members who were in contact with her had to um, lose a few days of work. But it's affected us obviously in many different ways, but thankfully not in our jobs. Like, yeah. So
So none of your family members lost their jobs during the crisis?
no, none of them. Some of them did lose their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I only know a few people who did lose their jobs, and most those who did were working in the food industry, like myself, which was the most affected industry. So, but thankfully they were also able to get unemployment.
Okay.
So I very thankful that none of us like had to struggle financially.
Are any of your family members undocumented?
Yes, yeah. Most of the generation before me is undocumented.
Like aunts, uncles, all of them.
Yeah.
And how have you seen that they've been dealing with, being undocumented, as well as, we're going through a health crisis, and we're going through uh, unemployment crisis, housing crisis. How has being undocumented added an extra layer to all of that?
Yeah. Well, I feel like people who are undocumented will always be the first ones to feel the effect of a crisis. So, the way that they have been affected is that we've realized that we need to keep our security, like keep if there's one thing that we keep talking about, like when we're in family discussions, is like, how are we going to keep ourselves like financially secure? Because things like this, thankfully, I'm so thankful, like I keep saying, that we haven't had to go through any financial hardships through this. through this pandemic and like through everything that's going on. I'm super thankful, but I know that that if we did feel the effects of this, we would be feeling it so hard because we are a paycheck by paycheck family. So, yeah, like there's most of my when I go to my family, like, and we have talks, we're constantly talking. We at least once or twice always bring up like, how can we, you know, keep ourselves financially secure, because it's really so scary. If we were to ever feel the effects of this, we would be crying for help. So
Have you seen that some of your undocumented family members, have they received any type of like federal or state assistance?
no, they haven't. I mean, no, not the undocumented ones, because I mean they can't. So, and yeah, it's so sad, but they can't, and so we can't afford to lose
Right,
like our jobs.
right. And so, like, would you consider yourself a religious person? Um, has this situation, um, and also, just so you know, we can pause the recording if you'd like. You want me to pause it? Yeah. All right, so we have resumed the interview. Um, and yeah, if let's just go back to that question, right? Because it is a very personal thing. It's a very it affects the Latino community like in a personal level, right? We have undocumented family members. We see how much they struggle. We see how much they've been neglected, and we feel for them, right? So talk to me a little bit about that, like about what that's like.
Yeah. Well, like I was telling you before,
Mhm.
um, that undocumented folks will always be the first ones to feel the effects of a crisis, whether it be an economic crisis or like a public health crisis, which in this case it was both. But yeah, undocumented folks will always be the first ones to feel the effect. And like I was telling you before, it's so sad that like undocumented folks are constantly working to hold this country together. Like you said, we are literally the backbones of this country, and how the government fails to see how in debt they are to our work. Like in so many ways they fail to see that, in the sense that, you know, that they don't, for example, like a big thing that worries me with my grandpa, who is undocumented, is that like he will not be able to get social security when he retires from his job. And that worries me so much because, like I had already told you, we are a paycheck to paycheck family. So I mean, where is there room for him to save? Like, what are you gonna, like, what is going to happen after you can't work? Which, I mean, he's practically there already,
Mhm.
but when you can't afford to retire,
Mhm.
you you push past your health limits.
Right.
Like you push beyond what you can do. And that is true for so many old Latino folks.
Mhm.
And like that's why multi-generational households exist.
Mhm.
Like that's why, yeah, there's so many issues. But so yeah.
So it's like you, because you had mentioned too, like that Latino families tend to be like close knit, and I think it's also out of necessity, right? We have to be because we don't get that government assistance because of many of our family members being undocumented, right? We are always kind of like neglected and scapegoated usually. So we have to stay together because we have nothing else at the end, right? So that's why family is very important to you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. um because we are the only ones who can rely on ourselves to like help each other to pick ourselves up. So yeah, in a government that can't do that for us, we have to do that for each other. And it's the same back home, like back in Mexico. Like it's the same. It's like they have it bad over there and they come over here and they still have it bad. So like we we've always had to hold for our own. And I see that a lot in Hispanic households. So, yeah.
And we've seen that amplified during the pandemic, right? I mean, we see that kind of lack of lack of I guess care to our community, lack of resources available to our community. So we've seen that firsthand with the pandemic. I mean, that's just kind of like push everything up to the surface.
Lack of empathy, lack of understanding, like I was telling you, I was listening to this podcast earlier about like field workers, right? And how they have to work at the age of 9 and try to graduate at the same time and move from state to state, like during the spring, move back to the fields. Where was I getting with this? Oh yeah, lack of empathy. And like, I don't come from a field working family. I don't. But I always think like, if we just listen to each other's stories, like how much empathy we could have for each other, like how much more understanding we could have for each other. So yeah, there's so much lack of empathy, so much lack of understanding. So yeah.
Okay. And so another question I had too was that you had talked a little bit about how you're a religious person, right? Have you seen yourself turning more towards, praying or religion during the pandemic? Have you been able to go to church, or if not, like how have you been dealing with that?
Yeah, I've been seeing myself reconnect more to my religion, and it's not because I've been able to go to church because the churches are closed around me, but I think I have like the whole Black Lives Matter movement and just being able to see like with social media, like making other people's stories more accessible and just getting us out to see other people's perspectives, like has helped me realize our privilege a lot, like my privilege. So I think like instead of like praying because I need help or we need help, I think there's more of a sense of gratitude. And for me, and like the things that we haven't had to go through, but I see so many other people going through right now. So yeah, I've been able to connect a lot more to my religion just because I have more gratitude and I recognize my privilege now.
And you're Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Another question I want to ask you too is how is going out into the world during COVID-19 different from pre-COVID?
Mm. Well, I mean, there's definitely like more of a sense of uncertainty because things tend to be changing on a day by day basis. I know, especially for me, who I'm trying to go into the entertainment, into the art industry, it's made me question a lot, like the worth of entertainment and the worth of art, which can almost be seen as two different things, but entertainment and art. But yeah, it's made me question a lot, like, right now where dancers are not really being booked or they're not being hired, like, how can I get prepared for that in the future, you know? Um, but also the necessity for art and how a lot of people turn to art in crisis, like in economic crisis and health crisis, like more people are painting now, more people are gardening now, like more people are connecting to self, which is more people are connecting to art. And so it's made me question that a lot. But it's also
detected at the front door.
a lot like the pandemic and being at home and the Black Lives Matter movement have made me empathize a lot more too, and have encouraged me to do my research and to be open to more perspectives So before the pandemic, like, I feel like a lot of people were kind of in a cycle of kind of like doing me for me, like, going like, what is my future? What is like, um, you know, what do I need to do for myself? Like, what do I need to do for me? Like, what's gonna get me money? What's my career? What's my future? Like, always on this grind to kind of like keep pushing up versus like post, like now that we're in now that we're quarantined and all of that, like I've definitely started thinking like what can we do for us? Like how can we like move up together? Like how can we move up for us? Instead of like me, how am I gonna keep pushing forward? So yeah.
Motion
So
detected at
kind
the
of an
front door.
extension, not only from the community that you have with your family, but also the wider community, right? How you're connected with the people around you. You think, in a way, the pandemic, even though physically we're distant, it's kind of brought us closer together in a way?
Hmm. Oh, that's a good question because in many ways I feel like um, the pandemic has highlighted oppressed people, people who have been taken for granted, underrepresented, and those who have benefited from the system and fail to recognize the other half. And those who have benefited from the system, um, I feel like they almost feel some type of anger for the Black Lives Matter movement or any outspeaking of the oppressed people because they fail to see that within themselves. They fail to how do I say this? They haven't experienced what um these what you know what these oppressed communities have experienced. So it's almost like there some people have been trying to like those who have privilege from the system are like trying to hold their privilege. I don't know. I feel like some people are just feel threatened by the Black Lives Matter movement or feel like their power or their security is threatened by the oppressed people coming out and saying, hey, like we need help, we matter. And
Motion
I
detected at the
also
front
I
door.
sometimes wonder, like, has this divided us more or has this brought us together? I don't know yet. I don't know yet.
Have you been able to participate in any BLM protests?
Yes. So I was able to participate in a BLM protest in the city of Orange, um, which was an interesting experience for me because it was in the middle of the pandemic. I come back home and I can't self-isolate because I live with family members. So I wasn't there for too long, but it was very interesting just even going to the protest and seeing like Orange at that time, their restaurants had opened up. And folks who were at the protest were brown, people of color, um, people of oppressed communities. And those who were eating at restaurants were white folks not wearing masks. And just it was so interesting for me to see that, you know, both sides all in one space. So yeah, it was very interesting. I mean, it's just the how the like how divided we are is so evident in so many ways, in so many even small ways. So yeah. Oh, also, and then like to go off of that, just um also like through social media has helped me a lot, like helped me to find a lot of resources. But I try to like also kind of take social media in like portions. because sometimes it could be overwhelming, and social media has definitely become a space to showcase, the crime that happens against people of color, which can be very overwhelming for someone. So I kind of try to take social media in little portions and try to take what I need from there.
So is social media a tool that you use to kind of stay connected with what's happening with the protests, with what's happening with any updates? So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, I used to go on social media it was a break for me. Like when I have a work break, I would go on social media. But now I feel like I go on social media when I want to find resources, or when I want to yeah, but I think that's like that's a really awesome movement that's going on with social media, is that like you go on social media and I feel like it's no more like, no, it's not time to relax. There's work to do now. So, yeah, and definitely what the Black Lives Matter movement has done for me is like I've filtered out who I'm following and started following more how do you say it, grassroots organizations. So I definitely fixed my feed to try to get myself to be more active in those communities. So yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about healthcare too. Did you have health insurance?
Yes, I do.
Did you ever get tested for COVID? And was it accessible? Did you find it accessible, or did you find it difficult to get tested for COVID if you did get tested?
Yeah, so oh my gosh, this is such a great question, because it just goes back to show how oppressed people, undocumented folks will be the first ones to feel the effects of a crisis. I have health insurance. I'm a US citizen, and it was very easy for me to go get my tests done and get my results within 3 days. My grandpa doesn't have health insurance. Like I said before, he's undocumented. So when someone in our household had been tested positive for COVID-19, for me, it was so important for my grandparents to get tested first, right? My grandma, it's a different story. She didn't want to get tested. Like, she was reluctant to get tested. She was refusing to get tested. But my grandpa was undocumented, so he couldn't go to Kaiser. In order for him to get his results, he would have two options. He can go to a private, like a private, a private doctor who will charge you anywhere from $150 to $300, which is money that we don't have to spend just to get your test. So he had that option, or he could go to the county to get the COVID test done, but his results would be coming back within 14 days. For a person who is already 65 plus, almost 70 years old, you don't have 14 days to get your results back. You could die within those 14 days. It's pointless. But so he either had the option to wait till he gets symptoms or pay $300. So yeah, it's so wrong yeah.
And you had mentioned how your grandma was reluctant and refused to take the test. Why do you think that is?
Well, she kept saying that, what did she keep saying? She kept saying that if she was quarantined, that, well, what was it? She didn't want to get the test done because she knew that if she tested positive, they would tell her to do the same thing that she was going to do, which was quarantine. So, yeah. But, yeah.
So do you think in a way she refused to get it because in the likelihood that she did have COVID, she would have to quarantine, which would mean she would have to lose work, which would mean she would lose money? So do you think that played a big role in her not wanting to get tested as well?
Yeah, definitely, because she didn't want to go. I remember she had mentioned to me that she didn't want to send her job a positive result. So I definitely think that played a role into it.
And it was your aunt who tested positive for COVID, right?
Yes.
But she was asymptomatic and she recovered, right?
Yeah, she was asymptomatic. She recovered, and thankfully, none of us who were in contact with her were tested positive for COVID-19.
And so we kind of uh, like touched on this a little bit, but we see this also kind of like, as you mentioned, a lack of leadership, right? A lack of planning. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how could this have been handled better? What kind of like led to this as far as like mismanagement?
Yeah, I feel like one thing that has played, I mean, every country has felt the effects of COVID, but we've felt it so much harder than most other countries who have already recovered. I feel like this administration has failed to recognize all the people who make up this country. They have also failed to keep strong alliances internationally that could have helped us prevent COVID from spreading so rampantly. But yeah.
What do you think, like, I mean, given the fact that we're going through a pandemic, housing crisis, unemployment crisis, and we have an election coming up in November, what are your thoughts on that? Are you going to vote? Are you looking forward to the election?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the election because I mean it's difficult because there's so many things going on that I almost feel like I don't know about the legitimacy of voting anymore. So I just, with the whole post office thing and you know, the government trying to intimidate our community by constantly putting obstacles in front of people who are um, you know, disabled, or people who are, you know, older, constantly putting obstacles in front of our way so that they could suppress our vote. It's made me question so much the legitimacy of what my vote is worth. And it's made me question, like, what are some other systems, some other tactics put in place to suppress our vote other than the stuff that is going on? You know, like, if they're doing this now, there for sure has to be other things, you know, that has suppressed our vote. So, but I will be voting because I can, because I know people who cannot have Trump for the next 4 years. Because I know people who will really feel the wrath of his presidency if he were to become president for the next 4 years. Because I know that there are people who are less privileged than me who will be feeling, you know, more first-handedly, you know, the decisions that he makes in office. So that's why I'm voting. But do I think that our voting system is legitimate? I don't think so.
You had mentioned about the post office, right? You're referring to the fact that the administration is actively getting rid of mailboxes throughout the country, and, like you said, making it more difficult for people to vote. Do you plan on voting by mail or voting in person?
I plan by voting in person. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because of the problems with voting by mail, right?
Yes, because of the problems of voting by mail. And I'm like, what's gonna happen to my vote? Like, you know, I don't trust it. It's so it's so bad that I don't trust where my vote is going to go. That's just like basic citizen rights, is that your vote is going to be valued. And I will sit in line for a whole day, eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I don't care. I will not send my vote in by mail.
So as we conclude the interview, let's just talk, like, what are you hopeful for?
Oh God. I'm hopeful for the small little revolutions that are happening right now. Like, I know in our head a revolution, can seem like, oh, like, we're coming up armed, but there are small revolutions happening right now. And the conversation, I'm very hopeful for the conversations that are happening right now. I'm very thankful, for just even if my dad will always like have his own, like have some comeback on the, arguments that I have with him. I know that in his head, he's thinking about what I have said to him. He's at least listening, and I know that will affect him in some way. So yeah, I'm hopeful for the small revolutions that are happening right now. I am always hopeful for our community, because I know that we are so strong. Like, I have so much hope in our community, so much, because we already have such a good foundation of work ethic, of, I'm just so hopeful for our community.
And resilience too, right?
Yeah, resilience. Yeah, there's like, we are so much more resilient than they put us out to be. Like, we like, we're like, you and me, we're literally not supposed to be here. And look at us, we're here. You're over here. I don't even know, but it's a small percentage of Latinos who get their bachelor's actually get their master's. And you're out here getting your master's. Like, I'm out here getting my bachelor's. Like, look at us. We're not supposed to be doing this. Like, we're not supposed to be here, period. But we are. So I'm just so hopeful for us.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good note to leave off on.
Yeah.
A beautiful note. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be interviewed, for sharing your story. It's extremely insightful, and it's a very important story to tell. So just the last thing I want to ask is, before we conclude the interview, is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that I perhaps didn't ask you that you would like to mention?
No, I think I've mentioned, what I want to.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to end the interview. And again, thank you so much.